Welcome back, everyone, to White Feather's Counsel of Men. We are privileged to be here. This is session 4 of our time together. My name is Warren Hammonds, and our co-host is Philip White.
Philip White, nice to be back.
And tonight, we thought we might do something a little different. For the first several sessions, we have been focusing on a lot of the problems that we ought to face, that we need to face, and that in the end, these sessions will address. But tonight we're going to start a little bit something different with a little more positive spin on things and deal with our commonalities. Regardless of the color of our skin, regardless of our complexion, what do we have? What do we bring in common? And I want to start with a quote from Charles Johnson. About 30 or so years ago in the early 90s, he writes, "I believe in my bones that the things that separate us make up 1% of who we are, and that 99% of our lives are similar." We have given so much over the years to that 1% complexion, and it's a travesty. I think it's one of the great tragedies of our species. So with that in mind, we're going to spend a little bit of time, at least initially, on some commonalities, even if they're not positive commonalities that some of us might bring. I'd like to start by saying I think we all have in common our desire to be seen as a child of God. And with that, I want to say that I think we all bring a desire. We want to be treated with dignity and respect. And when we're not, what we bring in common is hurt. So I think some of the things we have in common are our hurts. And this starts from when we're a child. When we're children, we hurt when we are made fun of, when we're picked on, when we're called names. When we grow up into adulthood, those same hurts, similar hurts occur when we are disenfranchised, when we are discriminated against, when we are cruelly insulted. So some of those things I do think we have in common. We hurt when those things happen to us because we want to be seen in a positive and in a dignified light. We also maybe have in common some fears. We fear that the world may not be as best for our children as it is for us. And so therefore, one of the things we bring in common may be that we have a hope for the world to be a better place for our next generation than it is for us. Maybe those are some of the launching pins that I will throw out at first. I have a few more things of commonalities, but where does that strike you, Phil, or how do you need to or want to respond to some of those?
Yeah, I think you hit me pretty strong there when you said, not sure if the future for our children is going to be better for them than it will for us. I think the future is much brighter for our children than it was for us. I think that I look at my own children, and I think that the children today are more, if there was one benefit from integration, school integration, and we talked about that, so, is that gave these two separate group of people, African American, blacks, and whites, to actually come together through an educational system. But in that, it brought about an opportunity to build relationships. And when you said you played baseball,
Mainly.
You had some black friends that was on the baseball team. Yeah. So sports have always been a way to cross the racial lines, right? That's always been the case in America. And the integration kind of have brought our blacks and whites together in a way we never had it before. That we was talking ourselves. You went to an integrated school. I did not, right? So I never had that experience that you had. I had no white friends from first grade right on through basically college. I had no white friends. No.
I'm glad to be your first.
Yeah, you really are. And that's true. You really are. I told my wife that. I said, Warren and I, we got a tight relationship, and that's the first, as far as a white male that I can say. I've had some good relationship with people I work with on a professional level, but not on a level like this, where we're talking about life and all kinds of stuff. So that I do think that the future is brighter for our kids because they have that relationship and they just go with it. You know, if something's not right to them, they just call it for what it is. They don't worry about, can I say this or should I not say this? And if you see them in their marches and protests, they're just a mixture, just a cornucopia of people. And I think America's in good shape because of them, not of us. I think our generation is fading out, and this new generation is coming in, and they got their own processes as to what they think is right and wrong.
And I think that generation, though, I think they will hope for a better day for their child and their children as well. And, I think we have hoped for that and dreamed of that. I think that's what we have in common. I think no matter the color of your skin, I do think deep down we all want to hope for that better world that to live in now and to live in the future. I think one of the things that we have in common is that our character is not defined by the color of our skin. And sort of a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. We're not defined by that at all. The character is not about that. The character is from within. And the character is built on how we live and how we relate. I do think what else we bring in common is that we all strive to be somewhat successful. Now, the definition of successful may differ, but I think we all strive for some type of successfulness. And one thing that might sort of be controversial, not real controversial, but I know that you can speak to this a lot. I think one of the things we have in common, maybe more as men, is this competitive nature about ourselves. And I don't want to sound sexist with that, but it seems that we bring that type of man-upness approach to a lot of situations. I need to be a little better. I want to climb the ladder of success. I want to not show you up, but maybe outdo you just a bit. I want to have that competitiveness edge. And that can be used for both positive and negative, I think. So those are a few more things that I've thought of.
That's interesting you said that. My dear mother-in-law, she's deceased now, but she would tell my wife and the two daughters that there's no reason for a white person in America to be poor. She used to say that statement to her daughters. And she was born probably like 1920, right? And she was basing it on this I guess the so-called privilege clause. That white folks have more privilege, they have more easy routes to achieve things and stuff like that. But she just felt in her heart that if you see a poor white person, you have to ask yourself, how did that happen? How did that happen to this person? That shouldn't be. And I think that's we have to ask ourselves, is that true? Because we have in America we have a lot of white folks that would fall under the poverty line. Within the Black community, you can probably say, well, yeah, we know they're there. You just don't see them as much as you see poor Black folks. They aren't portrayed like poor Black folks in their communities are portrayed. You just don't see them. You just don't see poor white folks the way you see poor Black folks. So you think that there aren't any poor white folks, but they are. They are. America has a lot of poor people. We don't talk about it as a country much. Yeah, and that's where we have failed. America should not have poor people, period. It really should. We shouldn't have homeless
Yeah, that's
people.
a whole nother podcast
Yeah,
we could go to for
should
that.
not
That's for
have
sure.
any of that. But in regard to, when we go back to this thing about men and that the one thing that you and I talk about this a lot in regard to men having this propensity towards violence. And it's how we as men, if we know almost every day in America, when you turn on your TV in the morning, you're going to get news about violence. And 99.9% of the time, it's being done at the hands of boys and men. You know? And we have got to get to a point where we can stop and just ask ourselves, why has this become so normal? What is it about boys and men in our training? It's kind of like being in that man box we like to use for those of us that have worked with men. How do you help men get out of that man box? Because the more we stay in that man box, we take on these being competitive, don't want to fail, want to be independent, want to be my own man, can't nobody tell me what to do, no sense of discipline. And that has, in my research, in my mind, is that has contributed to why we have such enormous numbers of incidents of violence committed by men. It could be committed to another man or women or children. And I think until our political arena, until our social scientists, until our faith-based communities can begin to address that, we will never, ever be able to say we're a country that has a good balance between law and order. I just, in my mind, I just don't see it until we as men. And I heard this from on CNN. It used to be one of the hosts. He's no longer there. Chris Como. He stated, he was talking about, it was a month of addressing domestic violence. And he was talking about domestic violence would never, ever leave America until men get on the front line. If we're going to stop domestic violence in America, men, who most of the time, 99% of the time, are the ones that are the perpetrators. And until men get on the front line in regard to that and address that as a collective group, it will never change. I believe that. I think that we have a lot. When we talk about leadership, and men always like to call themselves leaders, we got to be leaders in all the areas of our lives. And when we talk about the collective culture which we are raising boys, it's not working for us. It really is not working for us. So we got to change that whole paradigm of how we're raising boys, because it shouldn't happen with each generation, one after another, generation after generation. We all end up the same way as far as our internal stuff.
Yeah, but it still seems like a small percent go that route. Whereas I could make the claim that it's more commonly understood and commonly thought within us overall of nonviolence. Because I remember the quote that you've challenged us with before, something like 99% of violence is committed by men. But most men do not commit violence.
Right.
So what we do have in common maybe is that propensity for nonviolence overall, but that small segment of society, who happens to be mostly men then,
right,
are still dominating the news and dominating the culture with the violence that we see and hear about.
And I think that's one of the problems that we report so much on violence. It makes it seem like it is out of control. When you're right, it may be a small population of a culture or a community that's committing the acts, but we get it all the time. You can't wake up in the morning news without some form of violence. So why do we report so much on violence? What is it about violence that we seem to be it has such an intense interest in. I don't know. Sometimes I wish we wouldn't. And personally, I don't like listening to news because I just get tired of the reports on violence all the time.
Yeah.
Like you say,
Sure.
I think that there are some decent, good men, but we don't hear about the good stories as much as we hear about the bad stories all the time. And I just wish we could flip that.
I think we dealt with some of our commonalities, what brings us maybe to the table together, maybe to highlight some of those, even though some of them are somewhat on the negative side. We're going to take a little break and maybe come back and talk about maybe the question, the devil's advocate question is, if we have so much in common, why are we so divided?
Okay.
After that.
Okay.
Well, we're back, and we left you with some commonalities, some things that we hope to have intrigued you with discussions with your friends and your colleagues of what commonalities do we bring, regardless of the color of our skin, and thinking about that Charles Johnson quote that only 1% of what we bring separates us, and that's our complexion, but it's 99% of our lives that are similar, and that's what we ought to highlight. That's what we might be able to build upon. And I left then with the question of, so if we have so much in common, why are things so bad? If we have so much in common, why is there the division? Why are there the barriers that we see and that we face, that we have to hop over, jump over? Why is there the chasm between us? So those are some of the problematic points that we need to discuss. And maybe to get us started in this, another quote by Philip Randolph. This is pretty good stuff right here from Philip Randolph. He's written, people often hate each other because they fear each other. They fear each other because they do not know each other. They do not know each other because they cannot communicate. They cannot communicate because they are separated. So the challenge is to bring us together to mend that separatedness that we see and that is apparent. And maybe mending that will help us communicate. Therefore, that will then help us know each other better, and therefore will help lessen the fear and bring us together. That gets us started.
Yeah, that's a good jumping off point in reference to this separation. We were talking about that Sunday morning, that 11 o'clock hour as being the most separated time,
Most segregated
time of day in America.
That's right.
White folks go to their church, black folks go to their church, and it's probably just as current today as it was 50, 100 years ago. But I think if we look at the church that is sponsoring us to be here in Charlottesville, Virginia, Trinity Episcopalian Church, they intentionally wanted to have an integrated congregation. And they intentionally went out to try to create that, which is wonderful. I have been able to meet so many men and women that are not of my complexion, that are wonderful, wonderful people, just absolutely nice people. So my own orientation as a man of color in America has been shifted a lot. Talk about relationships. See, and like A. Randolph said, if we don't develop relationships, we won't realize that we have a lot in common. We all have a lot in I think there's our culture is so geared towards media stuff, and if I'm a hate monger and I find a way to say something that's going to get the media people running to put me on their television shows, then America, the rest of us, the rest of everyone else, because of my own issues, that I got to create this foolishness and hate under hate, and the media people going to run to me, that I'm likely to influence others to think the same way I'm thinking. And I don't know, it's such a thin line between responsibilities, as far as what you, as a media executive or producer, freedom of speech comes with liabilities. It does. It really does come with. It comes with a lot of liabilities in this country, and I think when we talk about freedom, we would have to be careful, because I think the one thing that keeps us separated is it seems to be very easy to manipulate folks to believe one thing that may not have any foundation or truth in it at all. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how we fix that, but at least we can start talking about it. Mm-hmm. And maybe greater minds than the two of us got the answer. But if we don't start talking about it as men just trying to be decent men, and like you said, it's probably a lot of other men just like us, just trying to say something that can help bring men together. Because until men change, nothing's going to change in this country. Nothing. We always say, we've said this before, we always like to talk about our leadership, and we're the head of this, we're the head of the household, we're the head of a business, we're always the head. Well, if you're going to be the head, man, then take the leadership role to look at our internal issues in regard to the amount of problems that we have, that if we come together as brothers and begin to address this as brothers, as we come together to address this to create a better outcome for ourselves, then it's going to benefit everybody. But until we cross that bridge, I just see just a repeat. It's just a repeat. And I think that's where we got to be able to get to at some point.
Yeah, I think you hit it and you connected it to the quote that I just mentioned. We haven't talked. Right. We don't talk regularly. Mm-hmm. And that's what we need. So we need dialogue. We need this dialogue. Right. So that's why we're doing this. Mm-hmm. This is a good start, a good example, but we need many of these efforts going around. We just need it to be more common. And, I do think one of the commonalities that maybe we didn't throw out early on was that, again, not to sound in a sexist way, but to address the men, because our focus here is on Counsel of Men here. There's sort of a commonality. One commonality is sort of the reluctance to be vulnerable, because we might fear that how others might look at us when we're vulnerable. Yeah. I remember I was made fun of because I cried when I was a child a lot, when my feelings were hurt. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Men don't cry. Right, men don't cry. My parents were wise and said, people cry, whether you're a man or a woman. So I remember having the freedom to cry, and I think that has really helped me over time. My point is, though, that there is that reluctancy to be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're asking for in these conversations. And that's where talking takes on a different level of just chit-chat, but where we can truly listen and where we can truly share what's going on. And maybe that will help mend that separatedness. That will help tie us more together and heal. And that's what needs to happen to bring this separatedness, to bring the dividedness together.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's there's a Jackson Katz, Katz. He has done a lot of research in regard to what we call the hyperness of men, and he talks about this thing he calls sideline behaviors, that I can know that a friend of mine or just somebody I have a acquaintance with, a guy, is being abusive to his wife. I can see how he's trying to treat his children. He's real hard and mean and speaks very rough terms to them. And the sideline behavior in me will not allow me to address that with him. I would never say anything to him about how he treats his family, because in our man book, when we talk about the man rules, you don't talk to me about my family. You see, and most men have that built-in response that if I were to come to you and say, "Hey, Ron, I see that sometimes you sound a little rough with your wife." You go, "What? You don't talk to me about my family.
Stay out of my business.
Stay out of my business." You see, they're the catch-all. Yeah. But I care for you. And I'm just what I see, it just makes me concerned. I care for you. Is anything we can talk about? Most men won't do that. That's what Jackson talks about, that sideline behavior. It's an interesting term. And I think a lot of men, it's like when you know a man, every man that has committed an act of domestic violence probably has some people that know he's that way. Okay? But nobody has never found the courage. Men. Women probably talk a lot about relationships, but we don't talk a lot about intimate relationships. But most men that have that tendency to be rough, be violent, be unfaithful, we don't address that with that brother, because that's out of it. That's not part of the rules when you talk about what you can talk about with another man. And we should. Because the saddest thing that I've seen a lot of men end up doing, they can know a brother that's having a lot of issues, a lot of emotional issues, and he commits an act of domestic violence that results in him killing his wife and then killing himself, right? And the first group of people that's going to show up to be pallbearers were the guys that knew this all the time. They just never had the courage to say anything to him about that behavior. I've seen it in my professional life. And it's a sad thing to see, And it's one of those subjects that men don't like. Well, I don't say don't like. We're just not comfortable talking about one of these realities. And those that work in the area of domestic violence, particularly women, I'm talking their talk. This is what they talk about and try to train people to do all the time, particularly women. They know the red flags in a relationship. We don't do that in our culture. And that's one of the reasons why men are so uncomfortable to address a brother that's drinking too much. That's I use this term, just kind of like my term come to my head is street term, holding around too much. Just cheating on his wife, just doing all kinds of crazy stuff, drinking too much, just doing all kinds of crazy behaviors. And all we're saying, yeah, that's crazy, Jim. Jim just like that. But as soon as Jim he may commit an act, he may hurt himself. Let's just say if Jim decided one day, I'm done, I'm tired, and put a bullet in his head and kill himself. And everybody's shocked. I go like, why are we shocked? We all knew he had this capacity to do stuff like this. Everybody knew it. Everybody knew Jim would probably do something like this. Always carried around a gun and all that kind of stuff. But we won't cross that bridge when we talk about these very delicate issues that men are having every single day. But you talk about a bridge we haven't crossed as far as being able to really get into the heart and soul of what drives most men. When we talk about their relationships, if you meet a brother that's been married 4 times, and I say, well, what's the common denominator in marriages? Well, the first one was this, the second one was this, third one. The common denominator is you. You're the common denominator. But just being able to talk to men about relationships is it requires a certain comfort level, and I think we are really trained. We have to have a certain amount of sensitivity and training. Is what I picked this up from one of my partners about what we call compassionate confrontation. It can be a confrontation, but it's done in a sense of compassion. You see, it's like I think the greatest compassionate confrontator that I ever known about was Jesus Christ. Jesus was always confronting people, right? Yeah. He had no problems confronting people. When you read about his life story, this guy was always he would mingle with any and everybody. He had no preference. He didn't care. He just mingled with any and everybody. It was always done with a sense of compassion, in a sense of caring, in a sense of patience and kindness. Now, those words, you don't hear a lot when you talk about men, when you talk about describe a man, patience, kindness, compassion. Yeah. That's not in our vocabulary, you see. So, and we got to do a better job with just raising boys with those characteristics. And until we do that, we're just going to have a repeat of some of these common issues that seem to always pop up in the male culture. And it's, I just think America as a whole can be so much better if we can just raise boys in a different way and help men to free themselves from chasing manhood. I like that term, chasing manhood, because you really can't catch it. You really can't put an age on it. You can't put an income on it. You can't put how many cars you have, how many children you have. It's hard to define manhood. And it's one of those elusive identity issues that we struggle with. Big time. And until we can start having that kind of conversation, I think that we got some work to do.
Yeah, well, you certainly bring the expertise with how men deal with other men and the challenges that presents as we raise our sons or as we show an example to the younger generation of men. And maybe after a quick break, we'll come back and begin to explore a little bit more about, even though we have a lot in common, why are we so divided, and what do we need to do to get over that chasm so that we can be more together?
Yeah, thank you.